I have been what I would consider like a happy, casual drinker for pretty much my entire adult life. I never really felt like there were any consequences to drinking. I did well in work, I did well in school, I went to the gym consistently. The only thing that was really on my mind in terms of negatives from drinking was calories. That's pretty much it, honestly. Besides that, I felt like alcohol was really only a positive in my life. It made it easier to socialize, it made everything more fun, and so on. But I've been sober now for about 10 months, and honestly, I can say that I'm never gonna go back. I'm happier, I'm more productive, I've accomplished things in my life that weren't even on my radar before when I was drinking regularly, and it's really just been a universally positive experience. Let me tell you a little bit about why. I had my first sip of alcohol at 15, but it wasn't until 19 that I actually started drinking regularly. During my early 20s, I was definitely an alcoholic. The happy, functional kind, you could say, but I was certainly an alcoholic nonetheless. I was working full-time while in a master's program, I went to the gym 5 or 6 days a week. Generally, things were going pretty well for me, but I was partying pretty regularly. I would say I was drinking at least 5 days a week, usually not that much at any one time, so 2 to 4 drinks a night, which if you add that up over the course of the week, sure, it's a ton, but I was never getting super hammered on a given day. At the time, I knew there were some things about alcohol that were keeping me from my goals, but they were really mostly around physique goals. I was doing well in school, so it really wasn't a problem, right? I didn't really see that there was any way that alcohol could be holding me back or making my life worse. If anything, I felt like I needed it to have fun and to socialize without feeling really in my head or socially awkward. But all of that really changed on my 28th birthday. I was living in Berlin at the time, and I had a little bit of a cold that day. It was pre-COVID, so I didn't really think much of it. I took some cough medicine and then I went out to celebrate. Turns out that cough medicine earlier in the day combined with drinking later in the day is not a good combo. So I ended up getting really sick. Like, sick enough to the point where I was taking the subway home because I needed to get home right away. I felt terrible. And a woman stopped me to make sure that my husband was supposed to be with me. Like, good on her for checking on me, that's great. But being so sick from alcohol when you're 28 years old that a stranger has to check on you is not a good look. It's definitely not something that I wanted to continue having part of my life. I took a month off of drinking after that, and it was surprisingly easy. Since then, over the next 4 years, I took a month off here and there, and I took about 3 months off last summer. Each time it got easier and easier, but I always ended up going back. After these breaks, at first it would be super easy for me just to have like 1 drink a week. And that was always the goal, right? To be able to moderate. What I wanted was to be able to drink when I was at a friend's wedding, but not have any urge to drink on like a random Tuesday night. That works at first, but over time, for me at least, it slowly crept up on me every single time. So while at first, no problem drinking once a week, every other week, by the time it had been even a couple more weeks after that, I was back up to a couple times a week, and then often back up to 4 or 5 nights a week. Again, never a lot at one time, but the consistency was kind of concerning. Another thing I started to notice around this time was that while I was never getting hangovers or anything, because I wasn't drinking a lot in one go, anytime I drank, it kind of threw off my momentum for anything that could push me to the next level. So I was much less likely to go to the gym the next day, or if I did, I wasn't going to push myself super hard. And of course, sure, I'd show up to work, do just fine there, but I definitely didn't have the energy to work on a side hustle afterwards. So these positive things in my life were just harder to keep up and harder to push to the next level anytime I had had even 2 drinks the night before. I knew this, but I still didn't think it was worth giving up alcohol. Alcohol made me social, made everything more fun. Not being able to live life to the fullest seemed like it would be just an unreasonable price to pay for productivity. That all started to shift in January of this year. It is totally a coincidence that it overlapped with New Year's resolutions, nothing having to do with that in particular, but I started reading a book called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, and it had a really big influence on me. One of the main takeaways was it reminded me how much fun I had as a kid before I ever had alcohol in my life. I would go to sleepovers with friends and have so much fun that I would literally be crying from laughter. And this was completely sober. So obviously, I didn't need to have alcohol to have fun then, so why did I need it in my life now? So mid-January of last year, I quit for good. And here's what I've learned over the last 10 months. The first thing is I am just way more consistent with things in my life. I very rarely miss workouts. I have the strongest study skills that I've ever had because I'm able to study just a little bit every day without the previous night's drinking messing that up for me. I'm back in school while working full-time, and that hasn't felt overwhelming. And I've started a couple new side hustles, one of which is this YouTube channel. I honestly don't think that these things would have been possible if I'd had alcohol screwing up my momentum. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first and most obvious is alcohol messes with your sleep. So I've always been a pretty good sleeper. I go to bed pretty easily without having kind of a long time trying to fall asleep. I don't usually wake up in the middle of the night, and I wake up at 5:45 feeling refreshed, if you can believe it or not. But that is largely, I would say, because I'm not drinking anymore. So I never felt like alcohol was messing with my sleep, but there is an obvious difference now that I just don't have it in my life at all. I'm very, very consistent with my sleep schedule now. I'm not really out on a Friday or Saturday night, staying up super late most of the time. And so I have the same routine every single day. And let me tell you, it is really, really satisfying to wake up at 6 a.m. on Saturday or Sunday and actually feel good. I have a ton of peaceful, productive time that otherwise was going to be lost to just kind of feeling like poop. The next thing is alcohol has a really big impact on dopamine. So when you're giving yourself these really easy hits of dopamine from drinking, it's making it harder to enjoy doing hard tasks. Now that I no longer have this easy fix in my life, it's a lot easier for me to kind of get the dopamine hits that I'm looking for from checking things off my to-do list or, studying or going to the gym, something like that. It sounds boring, but I'm just as happy, and instead of it coming from something that's negative for me, it's coming from something that's positive. Alcohol also impairs the function of your prefrontal cortex, which makes it harder to regulate your emotions, make decisions that are good for your long-term benefit and maybe not as fun in the moment. The next thing is I am way healthier. I know this for sure because a few years ago, I noticed that I would get these really bad stomach aches every time I would drink. And it turned out it was just from basically acid reflux from the alcohol. I had developed this whole elaborate system of taking antacids to kind of get away with drinking, despite the fact that my body was clearly telling me it wasn't working anymore. So I had these antacids I would take before I went out, and then these other ones that I would take afterwards if I needed to. I would sleep propped up on a pillow. All of this kind of ritual just to make sure that I avoided a terrible stomach ache. Looking back on that now, that seems pretty crazy, but that's what I did. It got so bad at one point that I went to a doctor to ask about it, and his answer was literally just to take more antacids. He didn't ever say, hey, if drinking hurts your stomach, maybe stop drinking. He never suggested that at all, but turns out if drinking hurts your stomach and you stop drinking, you feel better. Now I basically never have to take medication for anything, and that's just the stuff that I was aware of. Who knows what was going on with the rest of my organs, but I can guarantee that they are happier now. It's nice just feeling physically good most days. The next thing is that I'm a lot clearer about what I actually like and don't like. When you're drunk, lots of things that are not actually fun seem fun. So you'll have a good time hanging out with people you don't actually have anything in common with, or you'll enjoy going to that restaurant that's actually super greasy and gross. It kind of lowers your standards in a way, and I've found that being sober has made it a lot easier for me to tell when I actually just don't like something. And that makes it easier to be able to make decisions about things that I should and shouldn't be spending my time on. On the other hand, now that I'm sober, I am bored more, that's for sure. But I actually kind of think that's a good thing. I think in the society that we have now, being bored is kind of a lost art. Being bored gives me an opportunity to think about new things, to be creative. Sometimes I have, little ideas for projects or ideas for conversations I want to have with people, books I want to read, etc., just from having time sitting, being bored. And that's really valuable. This boredom also serves a purpose and makes it clear to me what things I should and shouldn't be spending my time on. Like I mentioned before, this is way easier to see now that I'm sober. Now I'm much more aware of what things actually bring me joy and fulfillment, and I'm a lot less likely to spend time on things that don't. Being sober has made it easier to see what my priorities are and to actually prioritize those things. So because I'm not spending time on things that aren't actually valuable for me anymore, I have more time and energy to put into the relationships and activities that are actually important for me. Basically, I'm just spending more time doing what I actually want to do and less time doing what I don't want to do. The next thing is I found that maintaining my weight is a lot easier. This isn't a big surprise, right? I feel like most people who quit drinking say that they lose a ton of weight. I didn't lose a ton of weight because I've always monitored my weight pretty closely, but what I have noticed is my weight no longer kind of creeps up on me. So because in the past I've always been pretty attuned to what my weight was, I would notice when the scale would start going up, and then I would have to proactively diet to get it back down to kind of my normal maintenance weight. Now I don't have to do that. I'm just staying at my normal weight, eating normally, not dieting, not tracking my food, not really doing anything special, and that is awesome. Super fun, super nice, just not have to think about that anymore and not have this thing that's kind of sabotaging me and making it harder for me to achieve my physique goals. On that note also, I've been training at the gym for 8 or 9 years now, and let me tell you, I am not as jacked as you would expect. And so I can't blame that all on alcohol. I've made tons of mistakes along the way, that's for sure, but it definitely wasn't doing me any favors. I'm excited to see what I can accomplish now that I'm using my calories on food and alcohol isn't ruining my gains in the gym. Let's see where that goes. One of the biggest fears I had before quitting was that socializing wouldn't be as fun. But I haven't really found that to be the case, actually. As long as I'm hanging out with people I actually want to, going back to the whole bit about making sure that you're spending time on things you actually enjoy with people you actually want to spend time with, then I've had just as much fun as I did before. In a way, I feel like I'm relearning how to socialize like I did when I was a kid. If you're talking to someone you actually find interesting about something you care about, it's really easy to stay engaged in the conversation. If anything, I find that it's even easier for me to be present than it was when I was drinking. I do find that I often need to do somewhat more interactive things, but that's fine. That kind of gets me to schedule more activities with my friends rather than just going to the bar. So now we do, more wholesome stuff like go bowling, do a river float, hang out at a park, whatever the case may be. But as long as it has something active to do, that can be a really great way to get over a little bit of that initial awkwardness while you're kind of learning how to socialize sober. The other thing is booze made me sleepy. So I always noticed that I would kind of conk out earlier than everybody else, which I already do anyway because I go to bed at 9 p.m. But I would really start to fade with alcohol, especially if I was drinking beer. Now what I do is I have just a little bit of caffeine, and I find that that works actually way better for me. Other thing that's been really great is I'm more aware of what I say, so in a way that has made me less socially awkward because I'm less scared of accidentally messing up. I didn't often say things I regretted drunk, but it happened more than once. And now I'm able to be a little bit just more careful about the way that I phrase things so that my actual intention comes across in the way I communicate. I still definitely enjoy hanging out with drunk people, it's fun, but I think there's a little bit something interesting about watching it from the outside too. I've started to see in real time kind of the process of people going from being lively and excited at the beginning of the alcohol high to kind of slowly fading throughout the night, maybe getting a little bit slower, a little bit less engaging to talk to. And I'm not judging at all. I've been there, I've had a ton of fun doing that, but watching that from the outside has made me kind of realize that that's not something I want in my life right now. The last thing is that I'm just happier. I've always been a pretty happy person, at least since my early 20s or so. Pretty balanced, generally positive outlook on life, usually feel pretty good about the world. But when I was drinking, I had more unusual lows. So, I'd have these intense highs from a night of partying and then kind of a depressive episode for a day or two, probably just because I was tired afterwards. But I've found that for people who have more depressive tendencies than I do, that quitting drinking can make a huge difference. I have seen this firsthand in friends and family where they quit drinking. It doesn't happen overnight, that's really important. It takes a couple of weeks or months to actually experience any difference. But they quit drinking and over the course of the next few months, slowly just level out. It's really, really wonderful to see. I found that being sober allows me to experience happiness in a more authentic way. So maybe I'm not getting as much of the kind of hedonic joy, but there's a little more eudaimonic joy. I think that's how you pronounce that. So I'm not getting these rah party moments as much. Still to an extent, I still like hanging out with people and I still get a lot of that social energy, but it's not quite as intense as it was drunk. I'm not gonna lie to you. But I have a kind of calmer, deeper sense of joy and satisfaction in my life that kind of runs through every day. And for me, that's a lot more valuable. Okay, so maybe you've heard something that resonates with you and you want to try quitting drinking. I have some suggestions on how to approach that. So the very, very most important one, in my opinion, is do not do it before you're ready. Imagine you've listened to this, you're like, yeah, this sounds great. I really should quit drinking. And you're not really fully on board with it. You just think it's something you really should do for your health or your wallet or whatever the case may be. And you're a little bit resentful about the idea or feeling very uncertain in a way that you feel like your life is going to be a lot worse and you're really giving something up, then I doubt you're going to be successful, to be honest. It's really important that your conscious decision to quit be aligned with your subconscious values. It didn't stick for me until I really truly believed that I could live a better life sober than I could drinking. One thing that was super helpful for this was kind of self-brainwashing. So this works for me in a lot of areas of my life. I'm very easy to manipulate, apparently. So reading This Naked Mind, watching YouTube videos from folks who had been successful, other books and similar topics have been really influential for me to be able to change my subconscious views of a topic and therefore get that alignment between your subconscious mind and your conscious decision that you need to be successful and feel good about what you're doing. Another thing that helped me with this was learning how bad alcohol really is for you. So I had always known that it was bad for you, right? Obviously, but I would basically in my mind think, well, at least I'm not smoking, it can't be that bad if I'm not smoking and, I'm going to the gym regularly and I eat my fruits and vegetables, it should be fine. but I learned a little bit more a couple years ago, and that really started me down the path of questioning my choices. And it makes it a lot easier for me to feel good about my choices when I do have moments of doubt. Ultimately, my point here is just you should wait until quitting drinking feels like something you're excited to do and it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. That's when it will be easy and it will stick. Related to this is my second point. It's really important to understand why you want to do this. So maybe it's for some of the reasons I mentioned before. Maybe you're concerned about your health. Maybe you're concerned about the financial implications of drinking all the time. Maybe you just want to do it to support another friend or family member who's having a bit of a struggle with alcohol. Whatever the case may be, having a really strong understanding of why you're making this choice can make it a lot easier to make the initial changes and then stick with them long term. I think it's important to dig deep into this and really understand your reasoning. I have a guided meditation on my second channel where we talk about kind of reframing your relationship to alcohol, and there's some reflections in there to help you get clear if you're not currently. So I'd recommend checking that out if that's something you're interested in. The next thing is you need to have a support system. Having a support system can make a huge difference when you're making any change in your life. Ideally, your friends and family also quit drinking, but that's unlikely to happen. And just like with you, it's really important that they don't quit just because they feel like they have to support you or just because you are. They're going to resent you. It's going to be terrible. Really what you want is to have some kind of support system of people who are on the journey with you in a way that they're actually aligned and feeling good about it too. So if you don't actually have people physically in your life, that's fine. There's plenty of other options. So there are online support groups, there are local meetups, tons of different ways that you can get that support from people so that you feel like you have someone you can talk to, you can learn strategies from them, and generally just feel like you're not alone on this process. It's also important to talk to your friends and family who are continuing to drink about how they can support you in your decision. So it could be that you just don't want to be offered a drink. It could be that you would like to do more alcohol-free things together. So when you hang out, let's just avoid going to the bar, let's go for a walk at the park instead. Tons of different ways that people can support you, even if that's just respecting your decision and not poking you about it. And having proactive conversations can be really good for avoiding kind of awkward confrontations in the future. One of the most practical things that has been helpful for me is having alternative beverages lined up. So I really like tea, kombucha, stuff that's lightly caffeinated and tasty. If I have something in my hand to drink, that can just help me feel like I'm fitting in and like I'm also having fun at the party. One great thing is that a lot of non-alcoholic beers and wine alternatives, things like that, they look similar enough that nobody will even notice that you're not drinking, which in my opinion is the ideal case. I want to be in a situation where everyone thinks I'm having just as much fun, because I am, and I'm having a good time at the party, I'm enjoying my drink, nobody really questions it, and if I can have an NA beer that nobody notices, that's the best case scenario. It's also really important to remember your habits. So if you're like me and you can't moderate your drinking, that's something you need to be aware of for the long term. So one of the things that would mess me up a lot in the past is I would think that I could have just a drink a week and I would reintroduce alcohol and then slowly build up my drinking over time. I would get cocky the next time around though and think like, oh, this time I've got it. This time I really broke the addiction and I'm not going to do the same thing I do every time. But guess what? I did the same thing I did every single time. And at one point, I just had to acknowledge that that's not something that I can handle. Maybe one day, but not right now. The person that I am today really can only handle on or off. And the other thing that I have found really beneficial about just not drinking at all is it eliminates a lot of decision making that can just be tiring. So I no longer have to think about like, is today worth it? How many drinks will I have? Will I be able to stop at just one? It's just not on the table. Since I just don't drink, I don't even think about it. And then I don't have to fight with myself. There's no bargaining. There's no feeling bad if I did something that I didn't intend to. That's way easier for me. So having a really strong understanding of my own habits has basically been the game changer that I needed. And it's critical that I remember that for the long term. The next thing is to celebrate your achievements as you go. Sometimes the first couple days, the first week, the first month can be really hard. Acknowledging that you've done a super good job is really important for making yourself feel like you're on the right track. Another thing with milestones is to remember that you're not going to probably experience major changes overnight. It took me, I would say, 3 to 4 months before I really noticed any difference at all. But those things slowly accumulated over time to the point where now I do see a really big difference between myself 10 months ago and myself now. Since these changes are slow and steady, reminding yourself how far you've come, but also remembering that you've got a long way to go, can make a really big difference. Last one and most important one. If you fail, try again. So like I said, I tried quitting so many times. Probably at least 10 times I quit for at least a week up to 3 months before it finally stuck this last time I tried. And each time I learned something that helped for this final time where I actually made it stick. So if you mess up, if you fall off the wagon, that's fine. It's just a learning opportunity. You're gonna have more skills next time you try, and you're gonna be better prepared next time. So don't get discouraged, just try again when you're ready. I can honestly say that 10 months later, I don't miss drinking at all. I'm really grateful for all the times that I did drink. I had a really great time in my early and mid-20s, even my, early 30s, and I wouldn't change that for the world. But for the place that I am in now in my life, this is absolutely the right choice. My life is filled with a lot of joy. Not just the big hedonic moments, not just the big parties, but just everyday, comfortable moments of joy. I'm more present, more productive, and happier than I've ever been, and I can honestly say that I'm never going back. If you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, please consider subscribing and giving it a thumbs up. I'm just getting started with YouTube, and I have lots of ideas for things I'd like to explore. Also, if you feel like you need a little boost, or even just want to think about your relationship to alcohol a little bit more deeply, maybe you have no intention of quitting, and that's fine, there's a guided meditation on my second channel that I'd really recommend checking out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.